Do you ever find yourself doing all the things only to then realize that you're exhausted, you're off track, and not even sure if it's what you want anymore? Yeah, me too. In today's episode, we are having an honest conversation about self assessment, realignment, and what it really takes to make sure the life you're building is still leading you where you want to go. Welcome to the Rise Up Buttercup podcast, where we're on a mission to empower women across the world to build unshakable confidence, trust their voice, and lead with purpose. Around here, we tune into truth, turn up the courage, and rewrite the soundtrack of what's possible. So take a breath, grab your favorite drink, and let's rise up together. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so glad that you're here today because we are going to be talking about something that's simple and powerful and honestly kind of underrated: self-assessment. Yep, taking time monthly or quarterly to check in with you, your goals, your energy, your business, your relationships, your habits, your priorities, because let's be real. Life is always moving. Business is always changing. And if we're not pausing to reflect, we can find ourselves stuck doing things that maybe no longer align with where we're trying to go. I know for me as an entrepreneur, it is so easy to have 17 plus plates spinning in the air every day. One day I'm coaching, the next day I'm on stage singing, then I'm designing a new workshop or recording content, answering emails, writing blogs. But here's the thing I have learned: busyness doesn't always equal progress. Ooh, let me say that again. Busyness doesn't always equal progress. Sometimes we get so caught up in doing all of the things that we don't realize most of it isn't actually moving the needle, or worse, it's moving us in the wrong direction. That's why self-assessment is so key. And I don't mean judgment. There's no judgment, no shame allowed into this space. If you're new here, you're going to hear me say that a lot. What I'm talking about is an honest observation. An honest observation with yourself, with what's really going on, and what might need to be adjusted for moving forward. So I want you to ask yourself a couple of questions. First, is what I'm doing working? Second, is it still aligned with what I say that I want? Third, you can ask yourself, do I feel energized or possibly drained with the things that I'm doing? And then you can ask what's working and what needs to be tweaked. Because y'all, we're allowed to tweak. Now, not twerk, unless you can twerk. I'm not a good twerker. I've never been able to master that skill. So ladies who know how to twerk, congratulations, good on you. But we're talking about tweaking. We are allowed to evolve, and we are allowed to make these little adjustments to the things that we're doing along the way. And innovation itself doesn't have to mean a complete overhaul, right? I'm not talking about changing everything that you're doing. Sometimes innovation is just a 2-degree shift that changes everything. It changes everything when we can make these tiny little shifts in the things that we're doing every single day. And an example of this is I was just talking with a client about the book, Who Moved My Cheese? Well, at least I think it's a book. I watched the cartoon. You can look it up on YouTube. It's all about Who Moved My Cheese. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but if you're familiar with it, if the cheese is moved, I'm going to ask this question: if the cheese in your life has moved, would you notice? Or are you still waiting for things to work like they used to? Now, let me go into this again. I highly, highly recommend, if you're listening to this episode, Google Who Moved My Cheese. You'll find a little 10 to 13 minute cartoon. Watch it. Get the book if you want to read the book. I'm a cartoon video person myself, so I like to consume my education that way. I'm a visual learner. But go ahead and watch this, because what it really describes, super long story short here, is we get very complacent with doing the same thing, thinking that it's going to work forever, right? The things that worked in my 20s must also work in my 40s, or the things I did in my career early on must also work later. And that's just not how life works. And I want to be really honest with you guys. I have had moments in my life where I completely forget to reassess as well. In fact, I just had one of these moments within the last month, which is why I'm doing this podcast episode, because even as someone who teaches this, even as someone who is constantly growing and learning more and hopefully evolving, it's easy for me to forget the tools as well. So I'd love to tell you a story. A while back, when I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, where I live now, I used to live in Nashville. Before that, I was in Atlanta. Before that, I was in New York. But when I moved to Raleigh, I started to shift a huge portion of my energy in my business into corporate work. I had begun with coaching one-on-one clients when I started my coaching business. And for those of you who don't know, I came from the music industry. Pandemic wiped out that industry. I started my coaching business, started becoming certified as a life coach, a hypnotherapist, a master of NLP, and started bringing on clients. And I loved it. And then I started getting asked to do more corporate work and more keynotes. And I love doing speaking events. And then that led into, hey, why don't you lead a workshop or a series of workshops around leadership and communication skills? So I started shifting my energy into this corporate work. And I started getting booked for more workshops and team trainings. And don't get me wrong, I was very grateful that work started coming in. The checks were bigger than what I was used to with a one-on-one client. The clients were very impressive, and it felt at the time like it was a very smart business move for me. Growing and scaling as one person, you're always looking for what's next. But here's what happened. I slowly started to pull away from the one-on-one clients that I worked with originally. Now, not the ones that I worked with. Let me rephrase that. I started pulling away from booking new clients. The heart-to-heart coaching conversations that lit me up, I found that I had less time for them. And that transformational work with women who were ready to rise up and own their voices, that started taking a back seat to me finding the next big company I could do a leadership training for, or a DISC assessment workshop for, or any of the above, right? Learning how to communicate, how to present yourself professionally. I started leaning into this corporate space. And at first, I told myself, it was temporary, I'm expanding, I can do both. But I didn't take the time in this moment to stop and reassess. Now, fast forward to maybe just a month or so ago, even though I was doing more or have been doing more, I found out after I took a step back and I started analyzing my business over the last 4 to 5 years that I realized with all of the work I was doing more work in the corporate space, but I was actually earning less. Now, you're probably wondering, Amy, how is it that you were making higher paychecks, but you were actually earning less? Because the time it took to cultivate each corporate relationship took a lot longer than I had anticipated. So what ended up happening is I was putting all of my focus into these long-term relationships to build versus the one-on-one client that does not take that long to cultivate and to build a relationship with. And with corporate, there's also all of these hoops you get to jump through. For those of you who do corporate trainings, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so even though I was getting a higher paycheck from each individual event I did, I was actually making less overall. And here's the thing, it wasn't just financially, but I was making less emotionally, I was making less spiritually, making less creatively. And I realized after doing a self-assessment that I had drifted away from the mission that started all of this. And that was to help women trust themselves, to help them speak up, to help them make a meaningful impact. I mean, that's why I started the Rise Up Buttercup podcast in the first place. Not to chase someone else's vision of success, but to create a space where women could rise into their power without apology. So when I realized that I had started drifting away from my original mission, the original thing that brought me into coaching, the original song, Lovin' Myself, that you heard in this intro, I needed to pull back. And let me rephrase that. I got to pull back. I had an opportunity to stop and pull back. And I'm now learning how to say no to things that might look good on paper, but maybe they're not necessarily aligned with my purpose. I get to recenter, I get to recommit, and realign with my own voice again. And that's why this episode matters, because I don't want you to wait until you are knee-deep in work that doesn't fulfill you before you realize you've lost touch with what really matters. So, here are 3 quick strategies you can use to reassess and realign. Tip number 1, or strategy number 1. I want you to block 30 minutes each month for a personal check-in. Yep, you heard me, 30 minutes. This is all you need every single month. Now, I am not asking you for a whole day. I am not asking you for every week. Once every 30 days, block 30 minutes so that you can do a personal check-in. And here's what you're going to ask in that personal check-in. What's working? What's not? What needs more energy? And what needs to go? Yeah, I'm going to encourage you to toss some things out that are not in alignment. So I'm going to go over those questions again. Feel free to write them down. What's working? What's not? What needs more energy? And what needs to go? If you take time every month to just do a 30-minute check-in, and by the way, it may not take you 30 minutes to do this, but I want you to allocate 30 minutes. Could be the beginning of the month, could be the middle of the month, could be end of the month. I like the beginning or the end. They're nice book caps or bookends, but I want you to really reassess what's working, what's not, what needs more energy, and what needs to go. Okay, now strategy number 2. I want you to try using something called the start, stop, continue method. Now, I wish I was a genius and came up with this. I didn't, but let me explain to you how it works. The first, start. What should I start doing that aligns with my goals? So you're asking that question. What should I start doing that aligns with my goals? Number 2 part of this, the stop. What should I stop doing that's distracting or draining? Yes, so similar like the check-in, what's working, what's not, what needs to be moved around, you're going to use this method called start, stop, continue. What should I start doing that aligns with my goals? What should I stop doing that's distracting or draining? And finally, what should I continue because it brings results or joy? Now, hear that last one. What should I continue because it's bringing results or joy? Not all the things that we do are necessarily bringing results, but they might be bringing us joy. And I am someone that believes if we have joy and we are enjoying the process of what we are doing, we are going to create and innovate more so that we can have results. Boom, drop the mic. I hope you heard that. I believe that when we work from a place of joy and when we show up in our lives from a place of joy, we are able to get creative and innovate and work more to bring results. So once again, start, stop, continue. What should I start doing that aligns with my goals? What should I stop doing that's distracting or draining? And what should I continue because it's bringing results or joy? Now, the third strategy for you, zoom out. Yep, I'm going to say it again, zoom out. In NLP, we call this dissociation. Step away from what's happening. Push yourself back, almost push life in front of you to where you're watching it on a movie screen. You've probably heard me talk about this before on another podcast episode. Look at the bigger picture. Sometimes we can't see the forest from the trees. So if we zoom out, we can look at the bigger picture. And I want you to look at your health, your relationships, your spiritual life, and once again, that word joy, I want you to look at your joy. Are you spending time where it matters most? Or are you accidentally giving your best energy to things that do not matter in the long run? I don't know about you, listener. I have done this. I have spent so much time tweaking things and adjusting things and putting so much energy into things that do not matter in the long run. So when you zoom out, you're able to take a more objective and non-emotional approach to everything that's happening. And you can look at things a little more objectively. You can look at your health, you can look at your spiritual life, your relationships, your family, your joy, your career, all of that. And you can start figuring out if you are spending time where it matters the most, or if you're being distracted on things that don't really matter in the long run. So these are 3 quick strategies. Let's go through them again. Block 30 minutes each month. That's strategy number 1. 2, use the start, stop, and continue method. And strategy number 3, zoom out. Look at the big picture as much as you can. This is going to support you so much. So, one more thing I want to bring up before we end this podcast episode is that you are not behind if you realize something isn't working anymore. It is easy for our brains to play tricks on us and tell us that we went down the wrong path, or we missed out on something, or we're not as far ahead as we could be or should be. Please, listener, don't should on yourself. Don't do that here, not in this community, not in this group. You are here to be in a shame-free, judgment-free zone. And I want you to remind yourself that you are not behind if you realize something isn't working anymore. Maybe it worked in the past, maybe it's not working now. And what I want you to say instead is that I am wise for noticing. You are wise for noticing. You are. You are brave for shifting. You are powerful for choosing something different. Boom. Yes. Amazing. You are wise. You are brave. You are powerful just for showing up today and listening to this episode. So if this hit home today, here is a little gentle nudge for you to schedule that check-in. Give yourself space to reflect and trust that every little pivot brings you closer to the life, business, and version of yourself that you're meant to rise into. You have got this, my friend, and I am cheering you on every step of the way. Until then, rise up, be heard, and remember you are one of a kind and absolutely worth it. I'll see you next time.